Every single time I've talked about Collective Shout or Steam and Itch.io shadow banning content from their platforms, I have mentioned how this is not just going to target sex simulator games. This could target any sort of adult content, whether that's overly sexual or psychological, horrors and thrillers and gore and violence. It could mean a total shift in content we see developers making. And now we're finding out that Mouthwashing, a breakout indie game from 2024, has disappeared from Itch.io amidst the marketplace sweep linked to the payment processor censorship push. So, this is a That Park Place article. It says the indie game Mouthwashing has quietly disappeared from the search results on Itch.io, leaving players and developers confused. While the game is still accessible via direct link, it's no longer discoverable through the platform's internal search, an issue that drastically limits visibility and potential sales. This is such a big problem for indie developers because when you're a AAA studio, right, you have hundreds of thousands of followers on X and Blue Sky and people who are constantly looking at your storefront pages and maybe your direct website. But when you're an indie dev, sometimes your game only becomes popular because a few people see it on a search page and they see the wish lists are high and they figure, you know what, it's a few bucks, I'm going to monetarily support it. And then those people leave good reviews and talk about it on social media and it becomes a big positive spiral. But now when it can't show up on a search page, it becomes that much harder for your game to be discovered. And this could severely damage indie developers if their games with any form of adult content could be shadow banned. It says this unexpected delisting appears to be collateral fallout from a larger policy shift underway at Itch.io, prompted by new compliance pressures from major payment providers such as MasterCard and PayPal. These financial institutions are facing mounting scrutiny due to a campaign spearheaded by the Australian activist group Collective Shout. Now, I have said it from the very beginning, censorship is a slippery slope, and unfortunately, there are bound to be other pieces of content that get shadow banned or removed from platforms, and it doesn't just have to do with sex simulator games. It could be gore, it could be violence, it could be horror games, psychological thrillers. It could be so many different types of content, and now we're seeing it happen with this game that isn't, some pornographic experience. It says the case of Mouthwashing being removed from Itch, however, is particularly confusing. The game is not designed around provocative or adult-themed content. Instead, it's a darkly stylized narrative experience that explores themes of workplace disillusionment, identity, and psychological stress. While mature in tone, it does not fall into the categories identified by Collective Shout's campaign. Now, I know a lot of people remember this game back from the end of 2024 because there was a bit of controversy surrounding it because the Mouthwashing developer, who is now discussing how it's been removed, took to social media to express frustration after his game was noticed by Asmongold and gained traction among critics he referred to as the anti-woke crowd. Now, of course, I understand there are going to be people who say, I don't really care that your game has gotten removed because you attacked us in the past. I don't really think that that is the stance that we should go for here, because at the end of the day, it is still developer censorship, and that is bad. I don't have to agree with every opinion someone has to enjoy the entertainment they've created or to stand up for the developer's right to be able to publish it on a certain platform. These people would not defend me. In this case, I will sit here and defend them and their game because people do really love their game. Their game should not have been targeted and removed here. And with the state of the industry, it is important that all of these situations get called out. He had just recently posted how it had been de-indexed from Itch's search results. In other words, Mouthwashing was not removed because of harassment or review bombing. It was swept up in the blanket policy change rooted in content regulation, the very kind of censorship the so-called anti-woke crowd has consistently warned against. I know there are a lot of people out there who don't like my channel and don't like my content, but my stance has been very consistent, and that is that this is entertainment, and entertainment should be allowed to exist. If these platforms said it could not be monetized, that would still be bad. At least the content would still be on the platform. But when it can just be removed with the snap of a finger, that is absolutely terrible, and it should not be that way. Now, at this point in time, Mouthwash is still fully available on Steam. It has not been shadow banned there. It is not under review there, but that could happen because Steam is also implementing very similar policies. In Itch's case, they basically shot first and asked questions later because they were afraid of losing their payment structure. They decided to remove all NSFW content, or at least de-index it and make it so it wasn't easily accessible while each game is being reviewed, though Steam hasn't done that, but it doesn't mean that something like Mouthwashing won't be removed in the future. If there is a game that you personally like and that is from an indie developer, I would recommend purchasing it now so that you can experience it and you have it in your library, because right now indie developers are really going to go through a very bad time with games like The Witcher and Cyberpunk. Those games make a lot of money, so those aren't going to be as easily removed, though in 5 to 10 years we could see those games not even really be on these platforms anymore if it continues down this very dangerous path. I know a couple of other content creators have also been discussing the situation over on X, voicing how worrying this is. Hypnotic had said so. Apparently, Mouthwashing, the smash hit indie horror game, has been delisted from Itch. I went to the website to verify and indeed can no longer find the game. I went to Steam to check if it's still there, and it is for now. You really thought this was just going to be about Gooner games? You really thought it was just the chuds that were getting owned here? Hell, you celebrated it. Nice job. I know the Wokies really celebrated this game. How they hated that Asmongold was playing it when he did. Question is, what's next? Yeah, it's not just Gooner games or games with sexual content that are being targeted. It could be any sort of game with any sort of content, and that's what's so worrying. Smash JT also posted, I'm about to fight for this game because I believe in fighting for developer freedoms, not censorship. Setting differences aside to do what's right for the gaming community is what matters. He originally blocked me for covering the shitstorm he caused last year, and shout out to Hypnotic for the find. And there are other people like Savvy saying something the pro-censorship bloggers will never understand: consistency for the greater good. And it is definitely hard to trust the access media that right now is saying this isn't a great situation, because they, of course, are pushing their own agenda. They hate Collective Shout because Collective Shout is what they would call a bunch of TERFs. They are a organization that supports the LGB, not the TQ plus IA portions. They believe a woman is a woman and a man is a man, same way that J.K. Rowling thinks. So the access media hates Collective Shout and what they're doing, not because they stand with gamers and they're anti-censorship, but because they hate the organization a little bit more than they hate gamers at this point in time. And there are also still a lot of pro-censorship individuals just in the gaming sphere that are like, well, you know, it's just sex games and it's good that content that objectifies women is being removed. But while it is hard to sort out really who we should stand with or really call out, ultimately, it is important that we focus on fighting for developer freedoms. And it is important that every single instance of censorship like this get called out. So I will be keeping my eye on this situation. I'm curious to see if these developers issue a statement or if Itch sees this blowing up and they fix it immediately. Who knows? But this is a very, very bad situation because it's only been a couple of days and we're already seeing content that is not sex simulator content, right, being unfairly removed and being de-indexed. And that means that any sort of horror game, any sort of adult theme could be targeted. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this and found it important and informative, make sure to give it a like. And if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.